I was gone just 4 months, visiting my daughter in Oregon, when I came back to find 98 houses standing on my land like they'd always belonged there. Roads paved, mailboxes installed, kids playing in front yards built over my grandfather's old cattle fields. And there, at the center of it all, stood Vicky Ashworth, the HOA president, smiling like she owned the place. "Oh, you must be lost," she said, holding a clipboard like it was a royal decree. But I wasn't lost. They were. Because what Vicky didn't know, what none of them knew, was that buried deep in the courthouse basement was a 1924 federal easement contract signed by my grandfather that made every unauthorized structure on our land legally ours. Not county land, not city annexation. Ours. And when I pulled that dusty document out under a hot Tennessee sun, standing on the festival stage with federal agents in the crowd and news cameras rolling, I watched the color drain from Vicky's face as I read the clause that undid everything. "All improvements, fixtures, and structures built without Thornfield consent," I said, voice steady, "shall revert to the family in perpetuity." You could hear a pin drop right before the cuffs clicked around her wrists. If you enjoyed this unbelievable tale of suburban greed, justice, and sweet revenge, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. To HOA Stories, we bring you real jaw-dropping neighborhood showdowns every single week. Got your own HOA horror story or fought back against corruption? Drop it in the comments. Your story could inspire someone else to stand up and fight. Thanks for watching, and remember, when it comes to HOA drama, we've only just begun. It started with the sound of construction, chainsaws ripping through old oaks, bulldozers carving into the earth like it was theirs to command. I knew something was wrong the moment I saw the first foundation being poured, right where my grandfather taught me to fish as a boy. At first, I thought it was a mistake, maybe a boundary error, maybe a crew got lost. But then came the signs. Future site of Heritage Meadows. Luxury living in Sweetwater Springs. That's when the nausea hit. I wasn't looking at an accident. I was staring down the barrel of theft, 87 years of my family's land, claimed by strangers in business suits and pastel polos. Vicky Ashworth, self-proclaimed HOA president of Heritage Meadows, was the ringleader of the circus. She introduced herself with a forced smile and a clipboard, standing on my front porch like she owned the county. "I just wanted to let you know we're breaking ground today," she said, as if her announcement wasn't a declaration of war. I told her this was Thornfield land, my land, and had been for 3 generations. She laughed. Actually laughed. "Well," she sniffed, "that's not what the county records say." Turns out, Brad Ashworth, Vicky's husband and our county councilman, had orchestrated the biggest real estate scam since the Florida land boom. He'd manipulated zoning records, fabricated ownership documents, and approved Heritage Meadows development plans without so much as a phone call to me, the actual owner of the 847 acres they were carving up. The subdivision's paperwork, all signed using forged digital notary stamps. Ruby, an investigative reporter and longtime friend of my late wife Martha, started digging the moment I called. Within a week, she found that the purchase of the land had been backdated 2 years, with deleted web pages on the Wayback Machine, proving Heritage Meadows was already being marketed before any fake sale occurred. But this wasn't just fraud. It was environmental terrorism. My well water turned brown overnight. Cattle got sick. Willow Creek, which had run clean for decades, started foaming with chemicals traced back to runoff from the development. Ruby found the original environmental impact survey had been falsified. Brad's firm had replaced it with a doctored version claiming the area was non-sensitive grassland, when in fact, they were building directly over federally protected wetlands. And then, the hospital visit came. Chest pains. The doctors called it stress-induced, told me to consider assisted living. That's when Vicky visited, crocodile tears and all, offering me a $200,000 settlement to walk away. "This could all disappear tomorrow, Zeke," she whispered. "Is dirt really worth dying over?" That was the moment I stopped being scared. They weren't just stealing dirt, they were stealing legacy. And they were about to find out what happens when you pick a fight with the wrong old man. While I was in the hospital, Brad and Vicky moved fast. Brad introduced an emergency annexation vote to pull Heritage Meadows into the Sweetwater Springs city limits, effectively cutting county property law out of the equation and putting the whole project under his thumb. Ruby, who once broke a financial corruption case that landed 3 bank executives in prison, shifted into overdrive. She uncovered not just one fake notary stamp, but a whole graveyard of identity theft. Dead notaries, stolen credentials, copy-pasted signatures used to authorize every document tied to Heritage Meadows. Families who bought homes started calling me in secret. They were being charged thousands in special assessments by Vicky's HOA to fund lawsuits against me. Foreclosure threats flew like confetti. People were paying to defend homes they didn't legally own. One woman told me she sold her wedding ring to me, an HOA payment, thinking it was the only way to keep her kids from living in their car. I hired an independent inspector using funds Ruby scraped together from her paper's investigative budget. What he found would make any building inspector faint. Houses built on wooden platforms over buried swamp, illegal electrical wiring, septic systems installed without permits. These people are living in expensive houseboats on land that wants to swallow them, he muttered. Meanwhile, Vicky tried to bribe my doctor to declare me mentally incompetent and even hired a PI to spread lies about my military service. It backfired. Every dirty trick only added fuel to the fire. The turning point came in a dusty basement beneath the Sweetwater County Courthouse. Ruby, hunting for easement records for an unrelated story, stumbled on sealed 1924 railroad contracts signed by my grandfather, Ezekiel Thornfield Sr. Those contracts didn't just give the railroad temporary access. They included a clause so ironclad it might as well have been written in stone. Any unauthorized construction on Thornfield land automatically reverted ownership to our family, improvements and all. Houses, roads, fences, everything built without permission was ours under federal railway easement law. The subdivision didn't just sit on my land, it belonged to me. We had satellite images showing boundary markers being moved during my Oregon trip. Ruby uncovered emails proving Brad had accessed the same documents during genealogy research. He knew the easement existed and gambled I'd never find the originals. His arrogance sealed his fate. The federal government moved in like clockwork. EPA, FBI, U.S. Marshals. A coordinated takedown launched at the Heritage Meadows Family Festival, the very event Vicky had organized to spin herself as a victim. She scheduled a staged settlement offer on the gazebo stage, holding an oversized check while children sang patriotic songs, and the press filmed every second. She didn't know that just outside the camera's frame, Dr. Sarah Lightfoot from the EPA was testing soil samples hidden in a picnic basket, uncovering concrete dumped on top of contaminated wetlands. Nor did she know that Danny Kowalski, the construction foreman who refused to keep quiet, had agreed to testify, bringing blueprints, emails, and photos of illegal dumping. Federal agents served arrest warrants mid-festival. Cameras rolled as Brad's smug TV interview was interrupted by handcuffs. Vicky's meltdown beside the bounce house became national news. Her screaming accusation of conspiracies and deep state persecution only made her look more guilty. The crowd split, some devastated, others enraged, all realizing they'd been duped. Maria Santos, a single mother of 2, held up her forged deed in tears. "They said we were buying forever homes," she said. "They lied." I stepped onto that stage with my grandfather's compass around my neck and the original 1924 easement contract in hand. No mic needed. I'd spent 4 decades calling landlines louder than thunder. Every house, every mailbox, every driveway built on this land belongs to the Thornfield family under federal law, I said, holding the contract like a verdict. You built on stolen land. You gave me your subdivision. Vicky's final outburst, racial slurs hurled at Hispanic families, exposed the last rotten layer of her suburban mask. The internet did the rest. Hashtags exploded. Ruby's documentary aired coast to coast. Her work earned a Pulitzer. Mine earned justice. 6 months later, Heritage Meadows was a ghost town. EPA tape flapping in the wind. Salamanders returned to restored wetlands. The land healed. The community began to. Vicky got 15 years. Brad got 20. The sheriff and council members went down with them. Today, the Thornfield Wildlife Sanctuary protects 400 acres of habitat, and the Martha Thornfield Memorial Library anchors our town square. My students at the community college learn that property lines matter because history matters. When someone tries to steal your land, They're not just stealing dirt, they're stealing the story your family wrote in that soil. And if you ever find yourself up against an HOA Karen with a clipboard and a smile, remember, a surveyor's tape measure doesn't lie, but thieves always do. The arrests triggered a chain reaction that blew through Sweetwater Springs like a summer tornado. Vicky's social media army went silent overnight. Her carefully curated Instagram posts, sunsets over heritage meadows, smiling families holding oversized house keys, got bombarded with angry comments and demands for refunds. HOA members scrambled to lawyer up, but it was too late. The federal investigation moved faster than rumor in a church basement, and the evidence? Overwhelming. Ruby's team had gathered 400 gigabytes of video, scanned documents, notarized affidavits, and time-stamped drone footage showing illegal grading, environmental destruction, and falsified permits. Federal marshals didn't just arrest Vicky and Brad, they executed coordinated warrants across 5 counties. 3 building inspectors got hauled out of their offices in cuffs. The county clerk's assistant confessed under oath that she'd been paid $50,000 in cash-stuffed envelopes to lose certain easement records. Bank accounts were frozen. Brad's campaign donors faced IRS audits. The Ashworth family name, once synonymous with local power, became a punchline on late-night news. And the fallout didn't stop at Tennessee's borders. Homeland Security traced some of the shell companies financing heritage meadows to offshore accounts in Belize and Cyprus. Turns out, the Ashworths weren't just small-town crooks. They were laundering international money through fake land developments. A congressional oversight committee launched an investigation into rural zoning corruption. Ruby testified before Congress, showing forged documents projected on a giant screen while senators whispered in disbelief. Her Emmy-winning documentary aired on 3 networks. Vicky's meltdown at the festival, complete with her racist tirade and screeched conspiracy claims, became viral video gold, a masterclass in guilt unraveling live, on camera. Meanwhile, I got to work fixing the mess they left behind. My first priority was the families, not the Ashworths or the HOA diehards, but the honest folks who'd been duped into buying poison-laced dreams. I met with every homeowner, one by one. Some yelled, some cried. Most just looked tired, bone-deep tired from fighting for homes that never legally existed. I offered every family 2 options: walk away with federal relocation aid or stay under new rent-to-own agreements based on fair market value, not fraudulent appraisals. 23 families chose to stay. We tore down the worst structures and rebuilt from the ground up, this time with proper permits, zoning, and eco-conscious designs. Maria Santos became my right hand. She helped run community meetings and distribute water filters before the full remediation kicked in. Her daughters played barefoot in the fields where chemical waste once sat buried. They caught fireflies and built forts out of fallen branches, things kids should be doing, not dodging foreclosure notices from fake HOAs. Dr. Sarah Lightfoot returned every month to monitor groundwater recovery. She installed long-term sensors in the wetlands, collecting climate data that was later used in national resilience planning. Turns out, the contamination had been spreading slowly into nearby farmland. Had we not exposed it when we did, crops across the region might have been tainted for years. Farmers began stopping by my porch with pies and fresh eggs, not to thank me, but to ask how they could help. Real community showed up when the fake one collapsed. The Thornfield Foundation was born from the ashes of the scandal. We used the settlement money and land sale profits to fund scholarships for first-generation college students, especially in environmental science and civil engineering. I figured if we wanted to prevent another Heritage Meadows, we needed more people who knew how to read blueprints and ask hard questions. The library named after Martha became a local landmark, complete with a legal aid clinic and an archive of every newspaper article Ruby wrote about the case. Justice, in Sweetwater Springs, now had a paper trail. 6 months after the festival, I stood where Vicky once posed for groundbreaking photos. Same spot, different future. Instead of red, white, and blue bunting, we had native prairie grass swaying in the wind. Instead of toddlers in bounce houses, we had teenagers planting trees for community. Service hours. The wildlife was returning. Salamanders, cranes, even a black bear was spotted not far from Willow Creek. I took that as a sign Martha was still watching. And as for me, I didn't fade into the background. I teach property law and land surveying at the community college now. My first lecture always starts the same way. Never underestimate the power of a properly filed easement. My students laugh, but I see it land. They understand that the battle for Heritage Meadows wasn't just about land, it was about accountability. And it was about people like Vicky who wrap greed in the language of community until someone stands up and calls it what it is: theft. What came next wasn't victory, it was responsibility. That land is still mine, every inch of it, but now it belongs to a future that's honest, sustainable, and protected by people who give a damn. The ghost of Heritage Meadows will never disappear entirely, but its replacement, Sweetwater Springs Sanctuary, is something I can be proud of. And if another clipboard Karen ever comes knocking, they'll find a surveyor with a tape measure, a camera crew, and the backing of half the country. The transformation didn't happen overnight. Healing rarely does. Some days felt like trying to scrub oil off feathers, progress slippery and fragile, but the land remembered. And slowly, so did the people. Maria organized a wetlands restoration team made up of displaced residents, college interns, and retired contractors who still had enough grit left in their bones to swing a hammer and not ask for anything in return. Every Friday morning we met at dawn, shovels in hands, steel-toed boots crunching through gravel and wet soil. One week we'd lay down erosion control blankets. The next, we'd plant native sedges and wildflowers. Each seed felt like defiance. Each root took hold like an act of forgiveness. The town began to notice. Formerly skeptical neighbors started driving past the site, slowing their pickups to watch teenagers dig swales or install interpretive signs along the newly built boardwalk. A local brewery named a pale ale after the reclaimed marsh, Thornfield Revival, and churches that had once hosted emergency HOA meetings now held donation drives for restoration supplies. The hypocrisy faded, the truth settled in, and with it came justice that no headline could fully capture. In federal court, Vicky's defense unraveled like a discount sweater. Her lawyers tried the usual playbook: character witnesses, political persecution claims, sob stories about misunderstood ambition, but the evidence was too loud. Emails, bank transfers, surveillance footage of her instructing workers to cover toxic spills with landscaping bark mulch. And then there was the check. That stupid, oversized check she'd waved around like a game show prize. It now sat in an evidence locker, folded and faded, a monument to arrogance. Brad sang faster than a canary in a mine collapse. Facing 45 years, he offered names: contractors, inspectors, 2 senators who'd quietly pushed for zoning ass tracks across state lines. His plea deal made headlines from Nashville to D.C., triggering investigations that tore through the real estate development world like wildfire. Heritage Meadows had been the tip of a very large, very corrupt iceberg. Meanwhile, Ruby's documentary aired on national television. Stolen Acres: The Fall of Heritage Meadows. Narrated by a calm-voiced actress with a touch of Southern grit, it followed our story from the first survey marker to Vicky's arrest. It won awards, but more importantly, it opened eyes. Across the country, communities started auditing their own HOAs. Homeowners began demanding transparency, and landowners, especially elderly ones, got calls from legal aid clinics offering free easement reviews. I got letters, dozens at first, then hundreds. Some were thank yous. Others asked for advice. A Vietnam vet from Oklahoma who'd lost part of his farmland to zoning errors. A widow in North Carolina whose HOA president had condemned her vegetable garden for violating aesthetics. A young mother in Nevada fighting eviction from a mobile park being rezoned for condos. They all said the same thing in different ways: you gave us hope. But I hadn't done it alone. Not even close. Danny Kowalski was now something of a folk hero. His testimony before Congress, delivered in a plain plaid shirt, his voice shaking only once, helped pass the Kowalski Whistleblower Act, expanding protections and rewards for anyone exposing construction or environmental fraud. He turned down a book deal, started a nonprofit instead. Last I heard, he was building rain gardens in low-income neighborhoods, smiling more than he used to. As for me, I still wear my grandfather's compass. Still walk the property every morning, coffee in hand, boots crunching frost or kicking up dust, depending on the season. The old cattle paths now intersect with butterfly gardens and salamander nesting zones. Drones fly overhead sometimes, university students tracking regrowth, filming footage for presentations. I give them maps, I give them stories. The Thornfield Wildlife Sanctuary now draws scientists, tourists, and school field trips. Children squeal as they spot cranes in the marsh. They feed trout in restored streams. One kid asked me if the frogs were always this loud. They're singing, I said. What are they singing about? Justice, I told him. They're singing about getting their home back. He didn't understand, but one day he would. You see, when someone tries to steal your land, they're not just grabbing dirt. They're erasing your story, paving over your family's history, painting lies over your truth. But sometimes if you document every inch, if you stand when others say sit, if you shout when they tell you to smile, you get it all back. And then you build something better. 6 months after the last house was evacuated, the ghost of Heritage Meadows still lingered. Concrete slabs hidden beneath tall grass, mailbox posts jutting from the soil like rotten teeth. But where others saw ruin, I saw outlines. The memory of theft fading beneath fresh layers of earth and intention. We held the first Thornfield Heritage Festival on what used to be the subdivision's central cul-de-sac. No bounce houses, no phony settlement checks, just long wooden tables lined with handmade crafts, wildflower bouquets, and photos of what this land used to be, before the culverts, before the bulldozers, before Vicky decided that greed wore pearls and drove a BMW. Reverend Mitchell opened the day with prayer, not the rehearse, it kind politicians use at ribbon cuttings, but the raw, trembling words of a man who'd watched his flock nearly drown in lies. Lord, teach us to recognize wolves in shepherd's clothing, and give us the strength to guard the land you entrusted to our hands. The crowd murmured their amens, and I felt something shift. That day, Ruby unveiled a plaque at the entrance of what used to be the Heritage Meadows Clubhouse, now repurposed into the Martha Thornfield Memorial Library Legal Aid Center. The polished bronze gleamed in the sun, etched with words that made my throat tighten every time I read them. This land was stolen, then reclaimed. Let it remind us that silence favors the powerful, but truth, spoken boldly, rebuilds more than homes. 23 families now live on Thornfield land, not in cookie-cutter boxes stacked over poisoned soil, but in homes they helped design, modular, sustainable, rooted in reclaimed ground and real ownership. Every blueprint passed through community review, every foundation dug with care, and every deed backed by federal law, notarized with a signature we could trust. Maria Santos became the heart of our community. She now runs workshops for first-time homeowners, teaching them how to read easement maps, understand zoning regulations, and spot forged signatures. Her daughter, Camila, the one who once cried beside a bounce house now roped off with EPA tape, won a scholarship from the Thornfield Foundation. She wants to be an environmental lawyer. Sometimes, late at night, I walk the perimeter of the sanctuary. Stars overhead, the buzz of insects rising like applause. I still carry my tape measure, habit maybe, or a reminder, because every con starts with blurred boundaries, and every victory starts by measuring them again. The national ripple effects kept coming. That year alone, 17 fraudulent HOA developments across the country got shut down. Federal task forces raided shell companies and uncovered offshore laundering schemes that made the Panama Papers look like pocket change. Even Congress woke up, passing a sweeping Community Integrity Act requiring real-time ownership verification for all future developments over 10 units. Ruby stood behind the president during the signing ceremony, blinking back tears while the cameras flashed. She still visits, brings muffins, the good kind, blueberry, of course. She calls me Zeke the Avenger now, though I tell her she gives me too much credit. But truthfully, I know what she means. Because I didn't set out to be a hero. I just wanted my land back. But in doing so, I helped a town find its spine. I helped neighbors remember that trust isn't just a handshake and a picket fence. It's earned and defended. And when you fight for what's right, even if you're standing alone at first, others will find you. They'll stand with you. Then they'll fight too. Some nights, when the wind is just right and the stars hang low over the pasture, I swear I can hear Martha's voice in the breeze. Not words exactly, more like the warmth of her presence, the kind that steadies your hands when you're holding something fragile. A community, for instance, or the truth. That truth had cost me plenty: health, peace, even the illusion that good fences always make good neighbors. But in exchange, I gained something far more valuable: proof that justice isn't some abstract ideal scribbled in law books. It's real. It lives in courtrooms, yes, but also in front yards, in old barns turned community halls, and in every person who refuses to be bullied into silence. Federal restitution funds kicked in after the convictions. Families who'd lost their savings got partial reimbursements. It wasn't enough to undo all the damage, but it helped, especially when paired with the Thornfield Foundation's grant program. We made sure every child displaced from Heritage Meadows had access to health care, schooling, and a safe place to sleep. Danny Kowalski came out of witness protection to break ground on his company's first major contract, restoring the marshlands Vicky paved over. We stood together, side by side, watching bulldozers dig up toxic soil while environmental scientists guided the process like surgeons removing tumors. The wetland began to breathe again. Salamanders returned. Birdsong filled the air where construction sirens used to wail. Reporters still visit from time to time. They ask the usual questions. How did one man bring down an entire criminal operation? What motivated you to keep fighting when everything was stacked against you? I tell them the same thing every time. I didn't start this fight, but I sure as hell was going to finish it. They laugh. Some shake their heads in disbelief. Others ask for a quote to end their segment on. I give them the same line I told Ruby the night we uploaded the final evidence archive. Land is more than soil and title. It's memory, it's legacy, and you don't let anyone steal that, not while you're still breathing. Marcus Webb retired after the final round of convictions, but not before inviting me to speak at the Justice Department's Anti-Fraud Task Force Summit. Imagine that, an old Tennessee surveyor standing in front of a room full of federal prosecutors and policy wonks, holding a yellowed railroad easement like a badge of honor. I didn't use a PowerPoint. I brought my tape measure. The applause lasted longer than I expected. And Ruby? She never stopped. Her Washington Post column turned into a nationwide movement. She writes about real estate scams, local government grift, and the quiet heroes who stand up when no one else will. She's starting a foundation of her own now, one that trains journalists in rural investigative reporting. The first class is named after her mother. At the Thornfield Heritage Festival last year, Maria's daughter gave a speech. She's taller now, confident, spoke about how the land we stand on once hid secrets under manicured lawns and artificial lakes, but now it teaches kids how ecosystems heal, how salamanders spawn, and how neighbors grow stronger when truth clears the soil. I watched from the back, hand resting on the old compass around my neck. The same one Grandpa used when he first surveyed this land in 1923. I could almost see him standing there beside me, nodding slow and proud. Not because we won, but because we remembered what the land was for. Not to be carved up and sold to the highest bidder, not to be paved over by crooks in khakis with blueprints, but to be honored, lived on, protected, 1 inch at a time. 6 months after the arrests, Heritage Meadows was quiet, not peaceful, haunted. Streets that once bustled with forced smiles and HOA patrols now lay empty beneath rusted lampposts. The subdivision signs had been removed, leaving behind nothing but concrete stumps and the echo of a lie too big to keep standing. Federal warning tapes snapped in the wind. Yellow plastic and red hazard placards marked each entrance like scars. I visited the land often, walking the old trails Martha and I used to hike, where wetlands now showed the first signs of healing. I never thought I'd see the day when frogs and dragonflies returned to the creek behind the old barn. But nature, like justice, has a way of reclaiming what's hers. It takes time, it takes patience, and sometimes it takes a fight. I stood by the pond one evening, boots half sunk in the mud, and watched as a pair of children, Maria's girls, gathered samples for a school science project. Their laughter echoed across the water, pure and unafraid. It sounded nothing like the screams that filled that same air a year ago when parents realized their homes were poisoned, or when Vicky's arrest shattered the illusion of safety they'd all been sold. They'd asked me, more than once, why I let anyone stay after what had happened. Because this land isn't just mine. It belongs to those who care for it, who don't pave over creeks or forge deeds in backrooms or dump chemical runoff like it's just business. It belongs to those who look at land and see something sacred, not something profitable. When I signed those rent-to-own agreements, I didn't just give families a second chance. I gave the land a future. Maria became more than just a liaison. She became a neighbor, a voice, a leader, the kind I'd trust with anything, including this land, if I were gone tomorrow. She started a school garden project with the local science teacher, T. Hay cleared a section of reclaimed soil, planting vegetables and wildflowers, using runoff capture systems designed by university interns. They named it the Promise Patch. I asked why. Maria just smiled. Because it proves something good can grow here again. And she was right. Even in a place built on lies. Even on land stolen and poisoned. Even after the HOA queen fell screaming into the back of a federal van while bounce houses deflated behind her. Good could grow again. It just needed truth, sunlight, and a little room to breathe. The Thornfield Foundation funded greenhouse projects, a wetlands observation deck, and even a rural justice internship with the local college. We set aside land for conservation and outdoor classrooms. The kids from Sweetwater Elementary now study the salamander population every spring, tracking how the ecosystem rebuilds itself when left alone by people with bad intentions. The land keeps healing. So do we. And the final irony? The subdivision Vicky and Brad tried to build, Heritage Meadows, will be remembered not for what they wanted it to become, but for what it tried to bury. Truth, history, and the power of one voice saying, "Not on my land." Every morning, I still walk my property line with my surveyor's compass and tape, not because I doubt the boundaries, but because it reminds me where I come from and what it took to protect every inch of it. They tried to erase my past with blueprints. Too bad they built their future on my land. And now, that land remembers. I still walk the ridge line every morning, the same way my grandfather did 100 years ago. Surveyor's compass around my neck, thermos of coffee in hand, boots pressing into land that remembers who it belongs to. The air smells different now, cleaner, sharper. It's not just the absence of diesel and drywall dust. It's the restoration, the rebirth, the sense that something stolen has been set right. Salamanders have returned to the marshes, herons nest along the creek again, wildflowers have overtaken what used to be cul-de-sacs. Nature, it turns out, forgives faster than the law. Some nights I sit under the stars by the old oak near Martha's grave and talk to her like I used to. Tell her about Maria's girls catching frogs, about the scholarship kids graduating debt-free, about the Thornfield Foundation's new wetlands curriculum being adopted in 3 states. I tell her how the town finally woke up, how people stopped treating corruption like wallpaper and started peeling it off. I tell her we kept our promise, that we protected what mattered, that we never sold out, even when it hurt. She'd have smiled at that, quiet, proud, the way she always did when I came home dusty but determined, the kind of pride that only comes from fighting the good fight with both boots on the ground. And when people ask why I didn't just take the money, why I turned down buyout offers from developers and refused to flip the land once I won, I tell them it's simple. Because it's not just land, it's legacy. It's the soil my grandfather mapped, the fence posts my father drove, the wild honeysuckle Martha planted. It's everything we built, fought for, and protected with ink, sweat, and principle. The land remembers, and so do I. If this story reminded you of a fight you or someone you love went through, whether it was against an HOA, a crooked developer, or just someone who thought the air money made them untouchable, then drop your story in the comments. You never know who might need to hear it. And if you've enjoyed this journey of justice, legacy, and standing your ground, subscribe to HOA Stories. We shine a light on real people fighting back against real corruption. Because some stories need to be told, especially the ones they try hardest to bury. Thanks for watching, and remember, never bet against the man who knows every inch of his land. Not when it's all he's got left to lose. And certainly not when that land is every inch beneath your stolen subdivision. 6 months after the dust settled, Heritage Meadows was no longer a suburb. It was a ghost town. EPA tape flapped in the wind like cautionary flags strung across an abandoned dream. The bright vinyl siding had faded under relentless sun, paint peeling from front doors that would never open again. Once manicured lawns gave way to tall grass and creeping wildflowers reclaiming the earth. The subdivision, once billed as family paradise, now stood as a warning, a silent monument to greed built atop stolen land and buried secrets. Where children once played on rubber mulch, salamanders now crawled through wet soil. The poisoned ground had been excavated, cleansed, and nurtured back to life. Nature was healing, and so was I. Most days, I still walk the boundary lines of my land, compass slung around my neck, boots crunching on gravel, the breeze carrying the scent of honeysuckle and rain-soaked earth. The cattle have returned, the water is safe, and for the first time in a long time, peace has a sound, silence, pure and unbroken. Maria Santos is now the director of the Thornfield Foundation's community outreach, helping displaced Heritage Meadows families transition into new lives. Her daughters play in the creek where toxic runoff once flowed, chasing frogs and laughter through restored wetlands. When I see them, it reminds me why we fought, why we endured. The Martha Thornfield Memorial Library stands tall in the heart of Sweetwater Springs. Built from reclaimed timber and recycled stone, it offers not just books, but legal aid clinics, property rights workshops, and quiet places to remember the truth. Every shelf is lined with purpose. Every child who walks through its doors learns that land is more than dirt. It's history, it's family, and it's worth defending. Vicki Ashworth sits in a federal prison, her HOA badge traded for an inmate number. Her empire crumbled under the weight of her own arrogance. Brad, too, won't see the sun without a fence in front of it for the next 20 years. Their names have become cautionary tales, whispered in legal seminars and news specials. Danny Kowalski started his own environmental restoration company. He testified before Congress and helped pass whistleblower protections that bear his name. He's living proof that doing the right thing may be hard, but it's never wrong. Ruby won a Pulitzer. Her documentary became required viewing in every journalism school worth its salt, but she still visits once a year, sipping coffee at my kitchen table, eyes scanning the horizon like she's still hunting stories. We both know the land never stops talking. It just waits for someone willing to listen. And me? I teach surveying now, passing on my knowledge to a new generation. I tell them to measure twice and trust their gut. That boundary lines mean more than paperwork. They mean legacy. They mean honor. Sometimes I visit Martha's grave at sunset. I sit with her and talk about the day, about the progress, about how the land is whole again. Her favorite wildflowers bloom there now, planted by school children who never knew her, but carry her spirit forward with every seed. One evening, as the sky turned gold and the frogs began their nightly chorus, I placed a hand on her headstone and whispered, "We did it, love. We kept it safe. We told the truth. And now, they know." Because the truth always finds its way home, especially on land that remembers every lie told upon it. So if you're watching this and wondering whether the fight is worth it, let me say this. It is. Not just for your land, but for your name, your children, your community. The American dream is not for sale, not to paper tyrants, with fake smiles and stolen deeds. And sometimes justice doesn't come from courtrooms or council meetings. Sometimes it comes from an old man with a tape measure, a truth too loud to silence, and a promise made long ago beside a honeysuckle bush, to protect what's his, no matter the cost.